Welcome to Biden Brief. America's mini economic miracle may be fleeting. Financial Times. The U.S. economy has experienced unexpected growth, with estimates suggesting a rate of 3% or more this quarter. Economists had predicted a recession but have been proven wrong due to factors such as government spending, strong consumer confidence, and the impact of AI and low oil prices. American consumers have reduced their debt burden and have been able to make use of stimulus cash and savings accumulated during lockdown. However, there are concerns that once these temporary boosts wear off, the U.S. economy could face challenges. Trump praises Rishi Sunak for climate U-turn as PM's popularity drops. The Independent. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has praised British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for rolling back net zero targets. Trump, a climate denier, commended Sunak on social media platform Truth Social, stating that Sunak was smart for not bankrupting the nation for the sake of fake climate alarmists. Sunak's decision to delay the ban on gas and diesel cars until 2035 and reject environmental proposals has been met with criticism from climate activists and within his own Conservative Party. Trump suggested that the U.S. should follow suit and reverse its climate goals, claiming they are too expensive and not a priority. 1 year later, Italy's Meloni moves towards the middle. Deutsche Welle. Giorgia Meloni, Italy's first female prime minister, has increasingly adopted a moderate stance since taking office a year ago. Meloni, who leads the Brothers of Italy party, is part of a coalition government made up of 3 right-wing parties. Although she has not shied away from embracing conservative family values at home, she has toned down her rhetoric on the European stage and sought allies among EU leaders. Italy has been a major beneficiary of the EU's coronavirus recovery fund. Meloni also appears to be developing a relationship with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Meloni has also sought to focus on North Africa as a means of reducing migration to Italy. She has called for a naval blockade of North African coasts, although this has not found support from von der Leyen. Despite criticism from some quarters, Meloni's approval ratings remain high in Italy. Will the auto workers' strike jeopardize Joe Biden's manufacturing boom? Economist. Ford is setting up a $5.6 billion industrial complex in Stanton, Tennessee, which will include an electric vehicle, EV, plant, a battery factory, and a base for suppliers. Similarly, Panasonic is constructing a $4 billion battery factory in DeSoto, Kansas. These projects are part of a larger investment boom in the U.S., with companies announcing a cumulative $210 billion of investments in EV and battery factories by late 2022. This surge in investments has contributed to a boom in American construction spending, which has doubled since the end of 2021. Several factors are driving this manufacturing renaissance in the U.S. Financial incentives resulting from President Joe Biden's signature policies, the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, are contributing to the investment boom. State and local giveaways, the desire to outcompete China, and reshoring after supply chain disruptions during the pandemic are also factors. Carmakers, such as Ford, fear losing their dominance in the American car industry to EV frontrunner Tesla if they don't seize the initiative on electrification. While the surge in EV and battery factories may seem premature given Americans' attachment to gas guzzlers, the companies behind these projects see a commercial logic. The projects are already playing a role in national debates, such as in the ongoing strike against Detroit's Big Three carmakers. The United Auto Workers, UAW, is concerned that the new factories will be difficult to unionize. However, the cost of labor will be pivotal in determining whether America's manufacturers can regain their competitiveness. Overall, the impact of these mega projects is extraordinary at the local level. They are sprouting up in left-behind places that have long awaited a manufacturing revival. These places have earmarked large spaces of unproductive land for industrial development and have access to large pools of workers within commuting distance. The projects are contributing to further clustering in the American car industry, and their reliance on clean energy makes them symbiotic with the proliferation of wind and solar developments nearby. He spoke no English, had no lawyer. An Afghan man's case offers a glimpse into U.S. immigration court. The Toronto Star. An Afghan man who fled to the U.S. after receiving death threats from the Taliban has won a rare second chance at asylum after failing to clearly understand the court proceedings. The man, known only as Muhammad, was detained after crossing the Texas border in April 2022 and had his asylum request refused after struggling to express himself during a 3-hour hearing. The judge ruled that the threats Muhammad had received did not indicate he would still be at risk and that as his wife and children had not been harmed since he left, he did not qualify for asylum. The case has raised concerns about the opaque U.S. immigration court system, with Mohammed having waived his right to appeal despite reportedly not fully understanding the implications. He has now been granted a new hearing before a different judge. There is a backlog of 2 million cases in the U.S. immigration courts, and last year, judges denied 63% of asylum cases. He spoke no English, had no lawyer. An Afghan man's case offers a glimpse into U.S. immigration court. Associated Press. The U.S. immigration court system is overwhelmed and opaque, often resulting in unfair outcomes for asylum seekers. Afghan asylum seeker Mohammed, who is a Hazara ethnic minority and was receiving death threats in his home country, represented himself in an immigration court hearing after he crossed the Texas border in April 2022. Despite submitting evidence of his injuries from a 2016 suicide bombing, threatening letters from the Taliban, and medical documents from treatment for head wounds, Mohammed was denied asylum and later discovered that he had waived his right to appeal the decision. The judge ruled that the threats did not indicate Mohammed would still be at risk and that his wife and children had not been harmed since he left. The case highlights the difficulties faced by asylum seekers who are ill-equipped to represent themselves and lack a proper understanding of the complex immigration court system. Mohammed's attorney has won him a new hearing, and the Biden administration's decision to give temporary legal status to Afghan migrants living in the U.S. for more than a year offers additional hope. However, Mohammed remains in detention and fears he could still be deported. U.S. set to open embassies in the Cook Islands and Niue as Biden hosts Pacific Leaders Summit. The Globe and Mail. President Joe Biden is set to announce the opening of new U.S. embassies on Cook Islands and Niue on Monday as the Democratic administration aims to demonstrate to Pacific Island leaders that it remains committed to increasing American presence in the region. The U.S. will establish diplomatic ties with the Cook Islands and Niue as Biden hosts Pacific leaders. The Toronto Star. President Joe Biden is expected to establish diplomatic relations with the Cook Islands and Niue on Monday, as part of his administration's efforts to increase American presence in the Pacific region. The move comes ahead of a two-day U.S. Pacific Island Forum summit, where leaders will discuss climate change. Biden has prioritized improving ties in the Pacific as the U.S. grows increasingly concerned about China's influence in the region. The U.S. plans to provide $810 million in new aid for Pacific Island nations over the next decade, including $130 million for climate change efforts. Migrants entering U.S. illegally complain about government's border app. Wall Street Journal. Thousands of migrants crossing the Rio Grande have become frustrated with the waiting times to get an appointment on the smartphone app the U.S. government wants them to use. Many migrants have stated that the app offers appointments several months in the future, a duration that they are not willing to wait after a long journey from countries such as Venezuela. As a result, many migrants have decided to enter the U.S. illegally and risk deportation instead of waiting for an appointment. Ambassador Rahm Emanuel is America's #1 wolf warrior. SCMP opinion. Rahm Emanuel, the current U.S. ambassador to Japan, has been criticized for his use of Twitter to taunt China. His tweets have included comments about China's economic downturn and the disappearance of top ministers. The White House has reportedly told Emanuel to stop making such comments, as they risk undermining the administration's efforts to improve relations with China. Emanuel's tenure as mayor of Chicago was also controversial, with high levels of violent crime and corruption. Critics argue that sending him to Japan was a mistake and that his social media antics are damaging to U.S. interests. The Biden administration is poised to allow Israeli citizens to travel to the U.S. without a U.S. visa. Associated Press. The Biden administration is expected to announce that Israel will be admitted into the visa waiver program, allowing Israeli citizens to travel to the U.S. without a visa. This move comes despite ongoing concerns about the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinian Americans. The decision is set to be announced by Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas after receiving a recommendation from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Israel has met two of the three critical criteria for admission to the program, but struggled with the requirement for reciprocity, which meant treating all U.S. citizens, including Palestinian Americans, equally. Israel has recently made adjustments to its entry requirements for Palestinian Americans, including allowing them to fly in and out of Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion International Airport. Both parties want to win South Florida. Here's one Cuban activist's view of the political fight. Associated Press. The Democratic and Republican parties are vying for control of the Cuban American vote in Florida. The parties have different strategies for appealing to this demographic. Democrats emphasize the treatment of immigrants and draw attention to the state's inequality, while Republicans focus on economic issues and argue that Democratic efforts to combat inequality end up hurting middle-class families, including Latinos. The parties will have to react to a Trump criminal trial next year in South Florida on charges that he mishandled classified information. The GOP has been winning in Florida since 2016, when Trump won in a state that twice voted for Democrat Barack Obama. Last month, the Florida Democratic Party launched a voter registration effort called Take Back Florida to try to regain some lost ground. The party chair said it would be all hands on deck in Miami-Dade, where 60% of the voters are Hispanic. Both parties want to win South Florida. Here's one Cuban activist's view of the political fight. The Independent. Both Republicans and Democrats are courting the Cuban-American vote in South Florida for the 2022 midterm elections. Republicans are highlighting their economic approach, arguing that Democratic attempts to reduce inequality ultimately harm middle-class families, including Latinos. Democrats, on the other hand, focus on immigration issues, criticizing Republican treatment of recent border crossers, including Cubans, Venezuelans, Haitians, and other nationalities that are well represented in Florida. The Florida Democratic Party has launched a voter registration effort called Take Back Florida in an attempt to regain some lost ground. They will specifically target Miami-Dade County, where 60% of voters are Hispanic. Cubans are a crucial voting bloc in South Florida and have influenced presidential elections for decades. While the Republican Party has made significant gains in the state since 2016, when Donald Trump flipped the traditionally Democratic state, Democrats believe Florida can still be a swing state in future elections. The Republicans currently have a voter registration advantage of about 500,000, but Democrats hope to close that gap with their voter registration efforts. India had been riding a geopolitical high, but it comes to the UN with a mess on its hands. Associated Press. India's recent diplomatic spat with Canada has put a dent in its foreign policy triumphs, according to an op-ed in the Associated Press. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosted the Group of 20, G20, summit earlier this month, which saw the country make the African Union a permanent member and sign off on a final statement. However, Canadian leader Justin Trudeau's claim that India may have been involved in the killing of a Sikh Canadian citizen in June has led to a downward spiral in relations between the two countries. The allegations have thrown cold water on India's G20 achievements, said Happyman Jacob, founder of the New Delhi-based Council for Strategic and Defence Research. The op-ed adds that India's desire for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council has been hindered by the recent spat, and the question for Indian officials now is whether the crisis will damage its surging ties with the West. The U.S. is set to open embassies in the Cook Islands and Niue as Biden hosts a Pacific Leaders Summit. The Toronto Star. President Joe Biden will announce the opening of new U.S. embassies on the Cook Islands and Niue on Monday, a move to demonstrate the U.S. commitment to increasing its presence in the Pacific Islands. The announcement comes ahead of the U.S. Pacific Island Forum Summit, where leaders will discuss climate change in the region. Biden has prioritized improving relations in the Pacific as the U.S. becomes increasingly concerned about China's growing influence in the area. Last year, the White House unveiled its Pacific strategy, pledging $810 million in new aid for Pacific Island nations over the next decade. Zelensky's blunt talk wins support but also irks friends. Wall Street Journal. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been hailed for his communications skills, but his brusque approach to diplomacy has risked alienating his country's biggest benefactors. Zelensky, a former actor, has impressed Western public opinion with his handling of the war with Russia, but his abrasive comments about Europe's stance on Ukrainian grain exports has put some allies offside. However, his mixture of anger and gratitude reflects his desire to appear strong at home while showing appreciation abroad. While Zelensky's authenticity has won him respect and support, his impromptu reactions can be grating to career politicians and diplomats from other countries. His contrasting stances and unique approach to communications can come at a cost, and he has previously irked UN officials with calls to act against Russia and dissolve the Security Council. Zelensky has also compared Russia's invasion of Ukraine to the Holocaust, infuriating Israeli lawmakers. Despite this, Zelensky has been praised for his messaging, which has presented him as a strong but empathetic leader. Repercussions are essential for slowing immigration flow, Texas Democrat says. Politico. Representative Henry Cuellar, a Texas Democrat, has called for more repercussions to deter immigrants from attempting to cross the border illegally. He suggested that there should be more deportations and that images of people being deported should be shown to discourage illegal border crossings. Cuellar believes that neither President Joe Biden nor former President Donald Trump have offered comprehensive solutions to immigration problems at the border. He also emphasized the need for solutions that address the issue before immigrants reach the border, pointing to Mexico's assistance in reducing waves of immigration in the past. Cuellar called for more collaboration with Mexico to address the issue effectively. Trump's true believers keep the faith. The Guardian. Donald Trump drew a huge crowd of supporters in Dubuque, Iowa, on October 18, 2022. Many fans still wore Trump regalia and were selling Trump calendars and keychains outside the event. Trump is the clear frontrunner for the Republican nomination in 2024. Many of his supporters still remember his presidency fondly, citing the strong economy and low fuel prices of the time. Supporters were particularly concerned about immigration, as Trump's rhetoric about the southern border and immigration has intensified since 2016. Trump vowed to move thousands of troops to the border and impose a fentanyl blockade. He also promised to carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history and expand the travel ban he introduced during his presidency. Trump is reportedly planning to expand his presidential power at the expense of the administrative state if he wins re-election. Trump also drew criticism from conservatives over his refusal to support a national restriction on abortion and his description of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' signing of a 6-week ban as a terrible mistake. Black Republicans are making ripples in state and national politics. Washington Post. Several Black Republicans have gained national attention in recent months, as the Republican Party appears to be shifting to the right and embracing culture war issues around race, sexual identity, and abortion rights. The party has made efforts to diversify its candidate offerings by encouraging Black, Hispanic, and Asian American individuals to run for elected office at all levels of government. However, Black Republicans still make up a small share of African Americans who hold elected office. The Republican Party hopes to increase its support among Black voters, but it continues to struggle in this regard. Black Republicans generally do not emphasize their racial identity and downplay the role of systemic racism in American institutions. They argue that liberal policies have not improved conditions in Black communities and criticize Black voters for their loyalty to the Democratic Party. However, Black Republicans face the challenge of defending the negative image that many Black people have of the Republican Party, including former President Donald Trump's role in the January 6 attack on the Capitol. Recent political gains for Black Republicans have occurred in red states where the Republican Party holds supermajorities in legislatures and has pushed through policies that are unpopular with most voters. Some Black Republicans have broken with their Democratic colleagues on issues such as school choice, defunding the police, and election oversight, leading them to switch parties. However, the Republican Party's association with contentious cultural issues and its negative image among Black people pose challenges for Black Republican candidates seeking support from Black voters. Across GOP, many see Trump as likely nominee, including some rival supporters. Washington Post. Donald Trump is widely expected to win the Republican nomination for the 2024 presidential election, with some Republican politicians, including House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, predicting that he will be the party's candidate. Trump is polling at around 60% among Republican voters nationally, although his figures are lower in Iowa and New Hampshire. However, there is still some uncertainty about his success, with some Republicans hoping for an alternative candidate to emerge. The former president's legal problems are a cause of concern to some Republicans, who are uncertain about how they would affect a general election. Nevertheless, Trump himself is not taking the nomination for granted, and has been focusing on challenging President Biden for the presidency. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.